Welcome back. So today I just had my third session of rTMS, and I decided that today I will go through the Cambridge Depersonalization Scale. And I already went through these questions, so I want to go through them with you guys. So let's get started. So first of all, at the top it says that the following symptoms that we're about to go through, a lot of them normal people do experience them in their day-to-day life. So what's important here is the frequency, which is how often that I've had these experiences or you've had these experiences over the last 6 months, as well as the approximate duration on a scale from a few seconds to more than a week. So I found that going through these questions, it was actually quite difficult to accurately quantify the frequency and duration, because a lot of the times I am kind of engrossed in my day and I don't notice myself having these experiences. But when I do shift my awareness to if I'm having these experiences, I notice that I am indeed having these experiences. So it was kind of hard to quantify how often I have it, because it feels like I have it all the time, even though I don't notice it. Maybe most of the day for some of these some of these experiences, and so on. But maybe me being engrossed in my day and not noticing these experiences does count for me not having these experiences for the part of my days where I do not notice it. And it might just point to the fact that my depersonalization might not be as severe as it could be. So with that being said, let's get started. The first question: out of the blue, I feel strange, as if I were not real, or as if I were cut off from the world. Frequency, I put 1, so I rarely feel that out of the blue I feel strange, as if I were not real, or as if I were cut off from the world. I feel like I feel this quite constantly, and never just out of the blue. Not never, but rarely just out of the blue I just start feeling these things. It's more of a constant thing for me. Duration, a few minutes. So when I do sometimes maybe experience out of the blue that, okay, like I feel more depersonalized or derealized than I usually do. These episodes usually last for a couple minutes before I begin to kind of focus on what I'm doing again, and my focus from the strange feeling shifts again from that to like the task that I am doing at hand. Second question: what I see looks flat or lifeless, as if I were looking at a picture. So this happens quite often for me. I put 3, which is very often, and this lasts, I put 6, more than a week, but in reality this has been going on for the past around 7 years for me. It's almost it feels like it's almost constant. It's just that sometimes I'm just going through my day and I'm quite focused on a task at hand, so I don't notice it. But this right here is probably my main symptom, or one of the main symptoms that I have, that the world looks flat and lifeless, is as if I were looking at a picture. Parts of my body feels as if they don't belong to me. This is quite rare for me, and when it does, it's just a couple minutes, just a small episode. I found myself not being frightened at all in situations which normally I would find frightening or distressing. This also rarely happens for me, but looking back on some experiences, such as me losing an important thing like my phone or whatever, like I do recall not being so distressed and just feeling like it's okay, like it'll work out, it's not a big deal, while the people around me thought that I should be more worried about it. So that could be an example of this. So I put 1, rarely. My favorite activities are no longer enjoyable. Now this does happen. I know for sure that it happens, But in the last 6 months, which is what these questions are about, it's been pretty rare, fortunately. But when it does happen, it tends to happen in longer stretches of time, for a couple days or even a couple of weeks. Whilst doing something, I have the feeling of being a detached observer of myself. This rarely happens, and it happens in episodes. I don't feel like I'm an observer of myself. I feel like I am embodied, just that I feel detached from the outside world. The flavor of meals no longer gives me a feeling of pleasure or distaste. I do remember experiencing this in the last 6 months. Thankfully, it hasn't been very often, but there have been stretches of days or even weeks where I haven't enjoyed eating my favorite foods. My body feels very light, as if it were floating on air. I don't know if this really happens for me, but I put rarely and just a couple seconds for the duration, because I don't know if it really happens. It might happen, but it's not something that is very significant for me. When I weep or laugh, I do not seem to feel any emotions at all. I do laugh a lot. I do seem to have, my emotions do seem to be quite intact. But I have had times where I feel like my anhedonia is acting up, and I don't feel emotions, even though I laugh. Or even I go through the motions of like socializing and whatnot, and I make it seem like I have emotions, but there were times where I didn't experience emotions, like I had flat affect, and this could last from a couple days to even a couple weeks, so for duration 5. I have the feeling of not having any thoughts at all, so that when I speak it feels as if my words are being uttered by an automaton. This rarely happens, but hold on. Okay, over the last 6 months, I don't think this was a significant part of my experience, although in my past this was a much more significant part of my experience. Probably this would have been, let's see, it's from 0 to 4, so this could have been like 3 in my past. But thankfully over the last 6 months it hasn't been as big of an issue. One thing that I have to say about this scale is that the increments are pretty large. It goes from rarely to often, and I would say that for me, the feeling of not having any thoughts at all, so that when I speak it feels like my words are being uttered by an automaton. While it's not rare, I wouldn't say it's often. I would say it does happen like semi-regularly. I don't know. I feel like there needs to be like one more step in this scale. One more step, so that the increment is less big. But yes, like these feelings can last for me a couple days or even a couple of weeks. So 5. Familiar voices, including my own, sound remote and unreal. This happens quite often for me, like right now when I'm reading this questionnaire to you guys and talking to my computer. Like when I do focus on my voice, it does feel kind of unreal, and like that can be a little bit disorienting, so sometimes you will notice me pausing and trying to recollect my thoughts. So yeah, this is something that does happen like often for me, and when it does happen it feels like it's quite constant, and these feelings can last for a couple days or even a couple of weeks, I think. So that's 5. Or actually 5 is more than a day, yeah. But anyway, yeah, like it can last anywhere from a couple days to a couple of weeks, so this could easily be a 6 as well. I have the feeling that my hands or feet have become larger or smaller. I don't think this is something that I experience, so both get 0s. My surroundings feel detached or unreal, as if there were a veil between me and the outside world. This is one of my main symptoms as well. This is like quite often for me, and I feel like this has been like pretty constant throughout my last 7 years. So this gets a 6. It seems as if things that I have recently done and okay, hold on. It seems as if things that I have recently done had taken place long time ago. For example, anything which I have done this morning feels as if it were done weeks ago. So when I read this, I looked back on what I did this morning, how I went to class and whatnot, and interacted with my friends, and it does seem like it was a while ago, but it doesn't seem like it was weeks ago. So I don't think it's like as intense as maybe it is for some people. But for frequency, I put 2, which is often. I think it's quite often happening for me. Although if there was a smaller increment, again, I would pick that. So if there was a 1.5, I'd pick 1.5 here. Because I don't think it's rare, but it's not often. For frequency 2, so last couple minutes, just when I'm thinking about the events that happened in my past, and just trying to think about like if it feels like it happened a long time ago. So when I'm not really focused on that, it doesn't bother me, so I put 2. The next 3 questions get 0s. I don't have visions where I can see myself outside as if I were looking at my image in a mirror. I didn't really understand this question, but I don't have visions like this, so put a 0. I feel detached from memories of things that have happened to me as if I had not been involved in them. I don't experience this. Looking back on memories in my past, such as my graduation, which happened in May of this year, I mean, I definitely see myself in these memories. So I put a 0. When in a new situation, it feels as if I've been through it before. No, these get 0s. If anything, familiar situations feels kind of unfamiliar sometimes, so maybe it's like the opposite of this. Out of the blue, I find myself not feeling any affection towards my family and close friends. Sometimes with my close friends, I feel I don't feel like that emotional closeness that maybe I should be feeling with them. Just judging by like how they act towards me, like sometimes it's hard for me to reciprocate kind of the affection and their feelings of closeness that they have towards me. Towards my family, I do feel affection, so that's not as big of an issue with my family. But sometimes with my friends, I feel like they do show me more affection than I show them, and sometimes it's hard for me to feel that affection for my close friends. But this happens. I'll put a 1.5 here if I could. And 2, it lasts for it doesn't last too long. Like when I think about it, how much my friends mean to me and whatnot, like I can get over these feelings. Objects around me seem to look smaller or farther away. This is not something I've experienced in the last 6 months. I cannot feel properly the objects that I touch with my hands, for it feels as if it were not me who were touching it. I put 2, so often with a duration of up to a day, I think is 4 again. Let me check. About a day, yeah. About a day. I cannot feel properly the objects that I touch with my hands. Okay. I guess, like touching objects, it loses kind of its the complexity of the experience kind of is diminished with depersonalization. Kind of sometimes it feels like you're wearing like latex gloves when you're touching and handling objects and things in your surroundings. It's not as acute, let's say. Like your sense of touch the acuity isn't as great as it might have been in the past. So this gets a 2 and a 4. The next 3 get 0s as well. I did not seem to be able to picture things in my mind. For example, the face of a close friend or a familiar place. I think I have a pretty vivid imagination. I can definitely picture my friends' faces, my family's faces, where I live, where I used to live in the past and whatnot. Yeah, that's not really an issue for me. When a part of my body hurts, I feel so detached from the pain that it feels as if it were somebody else's pain. No. When I feel pain, I really feel it. Like, I experience it as if, as I should, basically. Like, that I'm in pain. And when I'm in pain, it's really something that I don't enjoy because I feel it quite intensely. Okay, I have the feeling of being outside of my body. Nah, like as I've said, I feel detached from the outside world, but I don't feel like I am outside of my body, so this gets a 0. When I move, it doesn't feel as if I were in charge of the movements, so that I feel automatic and mechanical as if I were a robot. I put 1, rarely. Sometimes I feel like my movements are like kind of awkward and whatnot. I don't think this is like too unusual for people who don't have depersonalization, derealization disorder. And it's, I feel like it is, it only happens for a couple seconds, so the duration gets a 1 as well. The smell of things no longer gives me a feeling of pleasure or dislike. I have had bouts where I don't feel enjoyment smelling things. This is really significant for me because like one of my biggest hobbies is to collect colognes. I have a big cologne collection, and I have had moments where I don't feel that intense joy, and I don't experience scents the same way as I normally do. But ultimately, I still do really love my colognes. I love smelling things. I really experience the world through smell. I experience smell so vividly. It just like transports me back to places and to places I've never been. Yes, even though I've had bouts where I don't feel pleasure or dislike from certain smells, or smells in general, this is something that is not too significant in my case. So I put a 1 for frequency, rarely, and 3 for the duration. When it does happen, it does tend to last. This could be like a 5 or 6 actually. I'm gonna change it right now. This could be, when it does happen, it could be like anywhere from a couple days to a couple weeks. So okay, but let's put 6 for that. And this used to be a 3, so we can change the final score. We can add 3 to the final score. I feel so detached from my thoughts that they seem to have a life on their own. I have had moments in the past 6 months where I have ruminated, especially because I just finished university. I just graduated, and just thinking about like my future and what kind of jobs that I can do, and just thinking about that about my jobs and whatnot with respect to my depersonalization disorder. These kind of topics can make me ruminate, and sometimes it does feel like my thoughts do have a life on their own, but it's not something that happens too often. So I gave this a 1. It rarely happens, and a 3. Well, when it does happen, it happens maybe for a couple hours, maybe even up to a day. But it's something that I can resolve quite well through going out to exercise, seeing friends and whatnot. Like I have techniques that I have kind of adopted over the last 7 years to help me deal with a lot of these situations. That's why like maybe my scores are not as high as it would be for some of you, or it definitely is not as high as it would have been when I first started experiencing depersonalization, because I have coping mechanisms and I have developed a pretty good toolbox of how to deal with this condition. 27. I have to touch myself to make sure that I have a body or a real existence. I know that I have a real existence. I know that I have a body, so I don't feel like I need to remind myself that. I seem to have lost some bodily sensations, for example hunger or thirst, so that when I eat or drink it feels like an automatic routine. This rarely happens for me. Hunger, I feel hungry every day. Thirsty, I generally feel thirsty every single day. At some points in the day. I think for me the biggest thing with this is libido. I've had stretches of time where I just don't feel any of my libido. So when it happens, it's usually just with my libido. I gave this 1. Rarely. Yeah, this rarely happens. I generally do have bodily sensations like hunger, thirst, and even libido. When it does happen, it could last anywhere from a couple hours to a day, maybe even a couple of days. So maybe 4, 5, or even 6 sometimes. But I would say in general, like a 4 would be good for this question. Of course, over the last 6 months. Number 29. Previously, familiar places look unfamiliar as if I have never seen them before. Previously familiar places look unfamiliar. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and change this. This, I would say, I'm gonna give this a 1, although it could be, if there was a 1.5, I would give it a 1.5 because I wouldn't say it's rare, but I wouldn't say it's often. Like for me, often is like something I expect would be happening like maybe every day or like, every other day. Like for me, it's not that often, but yeah, like sometimes familiar places do seem unfamiliar. And maybe this lasts for a couple minutes to maybe, a couple minutes to a couple hours. So I would give this a 2. So I changed 2 of my questions. So this is +3 for this and +3 for the other one, so +6. So +6. Bam. +6. So that's 97. Yes. So that is the Cambridge Depersonalization Scale. That's all the questions. Let's get to my score. The total score, the revised total score for me is 97. And this places me lower than the average score for depersonalization disorder. Even though it's lower than the average score for depersonalization disorder, it doesn't mean that I don't have depersonalization disorder. It just means that my symptoms may be a little bit less than average. And yes, I mean, in the last 6 months, I have felt pretty good in general. I do have some great coping mechanisms, and my lifestyle has been better. Like I finished school, I don't have crazy amounts of work, I get to exercise, and I don't know, it's just been a good last 6 months for me, so it does make sense that it is lower than the average, but it's still higher than the other conditions listed here, like temporal lobe epilepsy or anxiety disorder. So it is, I think, still well within the range of what you could expect from someone with depersonalization disorder. And here we have the average of the frequency and the average of the durations. And here I calculated it with my previous score without the 6 points added. But I don't think it's going to change the average too much if I go ahead and just use these scores and don't recalculate it. So the average frequency I got was a 0.9 average frequency was 0.9, which is also lower than what's expected for depersonalization disorder. It's something more what you would expect with anxiety disorder and temporal lobe epilepsy. I think this is because a lot of these experiences for me weren't a very significant part of my experiences over the last 6 months. Just a couple were a very major part of my experience, like the world looking flat and lifeless, me feeling detached and unreal from my surroundings. So those were like significant experiences, but the rest weren't too bad. That's why I have like a lower average score than what you would expect from someone with depersonalization disorder. Average duration, I got a 2.24, and this is about something you would expect with someone with depersonalization disorder. It's higher than anxiety disorder and temporal lobe epilepsy, and it'll probably be higher with it'll be a little bit higher with the revised score. So this is within the range of what you would expect from someone with depersonalization disorder. So this was actually the trait version of the Cambridge Depersonalization Scale, tracking how much these experiences have impacted me over the last 6 months. And next I'm going to go into the state scale of the Cambridge Depersonalization Scale, which is how I felt at the moment that I took the test. And that's going to be in a separate video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the Cambridge Depersonalization Scale state test. Okay? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.